democratic country. We do not take lightly the cost of that freedom. We humbly recognize the privilege we have been granted by being citizens of the United States of America. Help us not to take that privilege for granted, but to do all in our power and ability to be wise stewards of the trust that the citizens of this city have placed in us. Remind us to be intentional in the carrying out of our duties and to always keep the privilege of service to our neighbors first in our hearts and minds as we make decisions and conduct the business of the city. We humbly request your help and guidance tonight, and at all times we represent our community. In your name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, Diane. Appreciate it. Hope everybody had a good holiday. Looks like we're all here, so that's a good sign. Let the minutes reflect everyone is present. And with that, let's start with the approval of the minutes from the June 20th meeting.
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes as submitted.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Diane, second by Jerry. Any further discussion or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'll abstain.
All right, 6-0 with one abstention. All right, welcome to our visitors tonight. Thank you all for coming, appreciate it. Lynn, do you want to just make a quick comment on the budget timeline, which was put into your reports? Any comments?
It's just sort of like a save the date kind of thing, just to remind everybody that there's some important dates coming up for the budget, and I just tried to put all those down. I have the adoption date for October 3rd. So with electronic meetings and everything, be mindful that you can't vote you can't do any voting in a meeting if you're absent or participate electronically, if it has an item to do with the budget, so.
And there's 2 6 o'clock start times in August.
Yeah.
So don't forget that. Occasionally that happens, so mark your calendars. Salary ordinances are listed by November 1st and the elected salary ordinance by December 31st. So Lynn, thanks for putting that together.
You're welcome. It'll be in your budget book too, just so you can have your little helpful reminder.
All right. All right, so no unfinished business. Let's dive into new business. Excuse me.
Oh, we do have.
My mistake. It is the unfinished business is the second reading on the annexation ordinance. Jeremy couldn't be here tonight, but Justin's going to take over that. We had our public hearing at the last meeting, and it was approved. So I think tonight we're here for second and final reading. Anything Jeremy wanted you to add, or?
No, that's basically it. This is the secondary public hearing, so we would just ask that you hold that hearing and then make a decision on that proposed voluntary annexation.
Remember, this is the residents, the family that wants to get onto the city sewer off Old 30. So it's kind of the background on that. Questions?
I move we accept ordinance number 2022-0602
On second reading.
on second reading.
Jack. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion?
Point of order, should there be,
No, it's not a public hearing.
We're okay?
We've already had the public hearing. Yeah.
is that okay?
Yes, yeah, we don't need two
I'm
public
sorry.
hearings on it.
Thank you,
Yeah, I heard that too. I'm sure it was just
Okay.
misspoken, but
thank you.
yep. All right, there's been a motion and a second, again, on ordinance 2022-0602. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Now we'll move into new business. This is an ordinance that the city's been working on for a while. We've taken a few field trips. We've had a lot of discussion, trying to figure out what's best for our community, to enhance the opportunity for daycare, which is obviously a workforce issue. I'll just point out Muriel McFarland from IMD is here. She's been at the forefront of this this issue, if you will, for their company. And I don't want to embarrass her and call on her, but I think if there are any questions about this, we do have a great resource here in the room tonight that would be helpful. So, Justin, I'll let you get started and explain what we're going to do. Now, this was advertised and is a public hearing, so this will be the first reading on this ordinance, and again, as a public hearing. All right.
So the city is addressing barriers for residents related to childcare in our community. A committee was formed to reach out and engage with childcare providers to see what specific obstacles prevent them from fulfilling their mission. Practical difficulties related to the permissiveness of the city's municipal code were noted during these discussions. A daycare center currently needs a use variance to locate within an R1, C2, C3, C4, or C5 zoning district, and a special exception to locate within an R2 or an R3 zoning district. So regardless of the zoning district, anywhere in the city, if you wanted to locate a daycare center, you would need to take a trip to the BZA. Having these restrictions on daycare centers does create some difficulties for childcare providers with the current real estate market. They're faced with two options. Either they can, either the property is usually sold or purchased by the time they can apply for the BZA and get through the process, because that takes about a month, or they can purchase the property and risk thousands of dollars if their BZA request is denied. So with that, the committee, like Joe mentioned, engaged with some child care providers, took some field trips, looked around, and then looked locally and asked ourselves what could we do to kind of improve this situation. So what we're proposing here is that child care centers would be permitted by right instead of a special exception in an R3 zone, and they would be permitted by right within a C2 zoning district. We felt these zoning districts were more conducive to having this type of a child care center where it's a commercially run facility. There's a number of children that is restricted by the size of the facility. So we felt that those two zoning districts were permitted by right if they have all the other requirements for the child care center to locate there. We also would recommend that we create a special exception in the C3 zoning districts, and the intention here is just to make it a little bit easier if they find a property that has adequate parking and adequate square footage. That variance is a little bit easier to acquire than a full-on use variance within that zone. So those are the proposed revisions to Table 16 in the zoning ordinance. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you guys might have.
I did want to mention, first thing I wanted to ask is if you would explain the difference between a daycare center and a daycare home.
Yeah, so they can look very similar. The case that went to the BCA recently, and Muriel might fill you in on some of this, but the number of children is about the same that you could see the max number of children in a home daycare. The component that was missing was a residence. So without that residency requirement, if a company is starting or a business is using residence as a commercial facility, then that creates it puts it into a different category with our municipal code. So those were kind of the differences. The
So
state
I
does.
think 16 is the cap on the number of kids in these homes. And some of you have been through this discussion, the BZA. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that at last meeting that we voted on that ARPA incentive for Launchpad, this is the type of project that they're going to use those funds for. The idea is that it will hopefully incentivize business and industry to step out a little bit and provide childcare for their, if they desire, provide childcare for their employees in a residential setting And that will limit the regulation that they would have to go through if they were putting in a large freestanding childcare facility. So the residential daycare center gives that opportunity to, again, up to 16 total, no more than that, without incurring a lot of that regulation and cost, most importantly. Muriel, anything to add to that?
I apologize that I'm not entirely sure what you've all been subject to, the information that you've already received. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me any of those questions. But we're in uncharted territory here as far as city code goes, and even cities and counties throughout Indiana, where we are wanting to operate a child care home in which there is no it's not a residential property. The hours of operation at maximum would be 12 hours a day. No one is sleeping there. However, that could change eventually if we wanted to open it up to our second and third shift employees. So as such, we've been deemed commercial. And because we're commercial, that's where we're running into these codes that are creating barriers to the essential problem, which is childcare, which is, as the mayor had mentioned, essential to our workforce.
Again, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I
That's
know
fine.
you've been digging into this probably more than anybody in the community.
Well, I appreciate the efforts of you and Justin in appeasing me by coming on the field trip and looking further into this issue, because like I said, I don't think that this is unique to Warsaw. I feel like this is an epidemic that Hoosiers are suffering from, as well as many Americans, as we're all looking to find out how to increase our workforce and get the child care and quality, affordable child care that's needed and make it available. Even vouchers, the voucher system is great. However, there aren't enough spots. There aren't enough spots for the number of children that need those spots.
Okay.
We're trying to create more spots with this type of legislation.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Are there any questions?
So, yeah, are there questions of Justin on what's being proposed tonight?
Justin, I think it helped the Plan Commission if everybody would look at the map, that's the last attachment, and then you would explain what's in an R2 and what's in an R3 district and how that differs from a R1. So that map that's provided for you shows within our city where the R3s would be, where it was going to be permitted, and where the C3s would be, where it would be permitted. And it's helpful to look at the map, but then also, Justin, if you could just give us the explanation of what an R2 area is and what an R3 area is.
Yeah, so your R2s are a little bit less restrictive than in the R1 zoning district. R1s are typically single-family residential. That's the intent of those spaces. As a city, we've historically kind of protected those areas from commercial use. So here we have an R2 district where it's a little bit more urban. The density is going up, and then R3 districts or even to a greater extent where you get more dense residential as you move towards the urban core. So what I had is our GIS department put together this map to show how those zoning districts which zoning districts would be affected by this ordinance change or these permitted uses. Yeah, the context for an R3 is a lot more conducive. You have a lot of density of schools. It makes sense to locate childcare facilities in these areas. So.
I just wanted to verify that I understood correctly. They will still need to comply with the number of square feet of indoor play, outdoor play, parking, all of that.
Correct,
all
and
of
the state
parameters.
has additional requirements too, as far as those that kind of mirror what we have. So they would still need to check all those boxes before they could locate. those zones.
Mike, you look like you had a question.
Well, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I'm trying to figure this out on the fly. So you're wanting to put a business in the R1?
Not R1.
Not.
No, it's only R3. It's making it a permitted use in R3. It could be used in an R2. Right now, it's a special exception.
Yeah, the R2 wouldn't change, so the R2 is still a special exception, it wouldn't change. R3 would change and the C2 would change, so that light commercial district would change. I actually have a,
What's the P stand for?
that's the existing and proposed together. So you can
P is
see the-
proposed?
Yeah.
Okay, I have it right here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mike, we
Well, when I
did
saw the
discuss-
map, I saw
The red and the blue would be areas that would
C2,
now be
C3.
permitted.
Okay,
The tan color
I see.
is still special exception.
It would be, yeah, upgraded from a use
C3.
variance to a special exception.
Right.
Okay. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really a fairly small area.
Yeah, there are areas where there's clusters of residential and then areas where there's that light commercial use that wouldn't really be impacted at all by having this component mixed into the uses.
R3 does have a small business and
Okay.
it's a more liberal use. R1 is the most restrictive, so it will be a friendly move for people interested in providing these services. It's a cart before the horse. They get into trouble, and you've probably read
I
the news
understand.
with the bees. They've had all kinds of trouble, and so that's why the effort's been made here. And Plan Commission had a very good discussion. Diane helped me out, and then unanimously approved after going through this recommendation.
Well, I would say we approved passing it on
Yes, unanimously.
unanimously.
But it was a positive
There
recommendation.
was a
was.
positive
Okay.
recommendation after a lot of discussion on how it could affect homeowners, mainly around issues like parking and fencing and, things like that. The fencing issue is regulated by the state, so they require, fencing around playgrounds and things like that. And then parking would vary from property to property, basically, where they would have room. But you wouldn't expect that the people coming to drop their children off are not going to be parking there all day. So it would just only be parking for the caregivers, and the number of caregivers would vary according to the age of the children, the number of children they have of a certain age within the facilities, the ratio that they have to have for caregivers. So they may or may not have vehicles parked there. So I think that was the main concern maybe voiced at the Plan Commission, was just thinking about something like that, if it would detract from a residential nature. But we also kept in mind that like in an R3, you might have and do have in our city, multifamily residences, apartment buildings,
And business
duplexes.
activity.
Yeah, and a lot of activity, a lot of activity going on already. And most of those have some type of businesses within them too, so.
I would say the one field trip that we did was in a residential area, and parking was not an issue. They kind of used the alley as a drop-off. The neighbors had been concerned about parking, and this was I believe it was in an R1. And they've been, how many years were they there? They've been there for 28 years, and people don't even know they're there. And and that's R1, and we're not even talking R1, we're talking, basically R3 and potentially R3 with the exception, R2, but
So I'm not saying that to say that it ended up being a negative recommendation, but just that those were things that came up that we discussed, and, yeah.
I had several questions. It's
Yeah.
a friendly move if we decide to be favorable here. And like Cindy's question, Diane and Mike, your concerns, the state will have regulations and guidelines for them, and Diane mentioned fencing. We have guidelines. So the state is going to make requirements, and then we're going to have guidelines with our own, where can the fence be placed and how, and so they're still going to have some steps to make to be a good neighbor. But obviously, it can be done. Joe, you said that was an R1, the mayor, that?
The one we saw,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so, and that won't be allowed. It's the more liberal use R3, residential and multifamily and business, and then C2, so which is commercial activity. And you can see that in the red if you go to the map. And so,
I don't envision this happening, but there wouldn't be anything to keep 2, maybe even 3 from opening up in the same block.
Not if it's permitted.
As far as the fencing, I know that it was discussed. I showed up at that meeting for some
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah, you were there. Yeah.
And I think it was brought up that our fencing is allowed, but it's only 6 feet tall, right?
That's the maximum.
That's the maximum we can do.
In certain areas.
And we're not going to run afoul of state requirements being more than that, are we?
No.
Okay, just because this would be the time to address it. Okay. And then there was one other thing. The Mr. Keevan brought up parking.
You're right.
And he was questioning whether or not somebody would be able to put a parking lot in their front yard. And I'm not sure that was, I didn't understand whether that was addressed properly or not.
So they would still be required, without modification to the ordinance, they could, extend a driveway or add some parking stalls, but they would be restricted on the amount of lot coverage. So a homeowner today could add more parking to their lot as long as they didn't exceed that parking.
But they wouldn't go over
cover-
like the 40% or whatever it is that they're
Yeah,
allowed
yeah.
to do, or,
So-
okay.
So that restriction would apply to these uses as well.
And Justin, multifamily homes have the same restriction.
Yep.
So they wouldn't,
Oh,
I don't
okay.
believe it'd be treated any different than
Yeah,
that.
good point.
Good.
Yep.
I'll admit, I did have some concerns at the planning commission meeting, but, housing is a concern in this area. Do we want to be a growing community? Housing is a concern, and then daycare. My wife stayed at home because of daycare expenses. We couldn't, we had to make that decision. That was mentioned at the meeting, and I'm a department head at the high school, and I had a teacher, Jeff, I worked Monday and basically almost all of Tuesday just to pay for childcare. And that sort of, I was taken aback. And so personally, and then somebody who works for me in my department, I cannot imagine the numbers of families that are wrestling with affordable childcare, and is it even available? Do we even have it, number one, and then can we afford it? So it's a serious issue, and that's why, even with my concerns here, we need to be a growing community and friendly. And I think Justin and the committee, they've set something up that if they do come in, they'll be good neighbors. And it'll be a benefit for that neighborhood or that area and our community. Jeff talking. Yeah.
And I just mentioned personally with my education and early childhood education that I would much rather see a home under state licenses that was going to be providing quality child care than a place that wasn't suitable and safe for kids providing child care. So, that part of me wants to encourage more of this kind of thing so that there is a safe place for kids to go.
That's a very important point. Thank you.
That's probably part of the mom and grandma in me, and former
your
teacher.
career.
Well, and remember,
Career.
Launchpad has done a great job getting us to this point. They actually have helped the schools out with some of the
Yeah.
restrictions through the recent statute
Yeah.
that was passed down at the state level. And they're looking for opportunities, trying to balance out the regulation and the cost to make it affordable, and it's a
Yeah.
tough balancing act. And these little changes in our ordinance just create more opportunity for affordable childcare. because as has been mentioned, and I opened with, the workforce challenge is very real. Jeff, you just
Yeah.
talked about it at school.
Well, and as Jeff mentioned, I mean, he and I have had 3-4 weeks to think about this, you know. This is the first reading of an ordinance, and I welcome comment from anybody in my area if they come up with any things that I haven't thought about before or concerns that they might have that we haven't addressed. You know, I mean, I ran through my list and talked to people, but I'd still like to have public input if there
Well,
is
speaking
any.
of that, this is the public hearing, so I will open that up tonight, but your
Okay.
suggestion is there will be a delay of a couple weeks, that there will be time for that.
Yeah.
Unless you have any more questions, I will open this up for public hearing. So, is there anyone wishing to speak on behalf of the action or petition? Anyone wishing to speak on behalf? All right, is there anyone wishing to speak against the petition? Anyone wishing to speak against the petition? All right, hearing none. There's only 2 of you I've been looking at. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing portion of the meeting and again throw it back to the council for final comments before we consider ordinance 2022-0701. Justin, any final comments? Okay. All right, it's up to you all.
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 2022-0701 on first reading.
Thank you, Diane. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Jeff. Final discussion.
Well, one way to make childcare more affordable is to make it more plentiful.
Yeah,
So I would be for it.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, it passes on first reading,
I
7-0.
appreciate you bringing me up to speed.
There will be, thank you, and thank you, Jeff and Diane. I know you all have sat through this and tried to understand it and come to grips with it, and I think, I appreciate the work you've done. So with that, the next meeting would be on the 18th, correct?
Yes.
So July 18th, we'll be back here for the second and final reading. All right? Thanks, Muriel, for your help. Thank you, Justin, as well. All right, item 2 on new business is Resolution 2022-0702. This is a transfer request. Chief?
Who's coming up? Yeah, mine came up at home.
Council, just the police department would like to transfer money within the police budget, the 2022 budget. This is from both salaries and from the health insurance. So it's a total of $75,000. $25,000 will be to help with will be for the cost of the body cameras. We weren't initially planning to purchase those in 2022. The grant became available, so we took advantage of that grant opportunity. We have not purchased those yet, but we have received approval for the grant. So with the ability to actually transfer those funds of $25,000, that will get us started with the new new body cameras. That also includes body cameras for our ERT team, which is for their helmets for entries. And then the additional is $50,000 for the purchase of a police vehicle. The vehicle is available. This $50,000 includes the purchase price, and then approximately $11,000 for the installation of equipment. The plus side is we already have the in-car camera. We've got the in-car computer. We've got the radar unit for this vehicle, and so we're ready for just need the car and the emergency equipment that gets installed through a local vendor.
Chief, several of us, I saw it at home. It's not here on this. I think some have it, some don't. It's $75,000 total,
Correct.
and you have body cameras with grant money that will be used,
Correct.
and then it's the car.
And approximately $16,000 of that money will be reimbursed from the grant. And our intention is just to place that back into the
Right.
general fund.
That's I read. Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, you can't say, but that was the
Yeah,
gist of it.
I saw it at home. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. so-
Okay. thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure, so we all.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I move to accept the request.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor of Resolution 2022-0702, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, thank you. Thanks,
you.
Chief.
Hey, Chief, while you're here, I hear we got a good response for our next call for new officers.
Yes, so Steve Rocky's retiring next month, actually this month, we're in July, so this is for 36 years. We do have, a couple of new applicants that are in the final stages. Actually, I guess we just hired one last week, and then we have another one that's in the final stages that's ILEA certified, and we currently have a new group that we are in the interviewing stage. So we are currently at 38 with the ILEA transfer or hire, so we're only 4 away from being at full capacity. So we're excited about getting there. So we think we're going to be there hopefully before the end of the year. So
That's great.
I would like to publicly thank you and the department. Summer school at Edgewood, the presence of the Warsaw Police Department was very nice. I really appreciate it. As a lead teacher, cars in the parking lot during the school day, walking through the halls, talking to staff and students. I really appreciate the presence, and I know that's not easy to do. I know we're contracted and all that, but I want to thank you and the department for your visibility and presence, so thank you.
I'll pass that along.
Appreciate it, Chief. Thank you.
And while we're thinking, I'd just like to thank the police department and the fire department for their responses this weekend and doing everything they can to keep people safe and disputes to a minimum, and so people could have a happy and safe. It was a long, long weekend for you guys, the way it fell, and we just appreciate all the dedication and your presence out there.
Thank you. We'll pass it along as well.
Thank you.
All right. All right, the final item tonight, Resolution 2022-0701. This is a resolution by you all authorizing the investment of public funds. Lynn, any comments? How often, is this done annually?
Annually, we do this every year, and it's basically so we can get the best rate from any bank or financial institution in the state. And right now, the rates, hopefully, are going up.
And just as a side note, Baker Tilly does our investing, so it's done professionally as well. But as you see from the resolution pursuant to IC 51395, this is a requirement.
And
So
actually, our last investment was with the U.S. Treasury, and I think it was like a 1.65% interest rate
coming up.
for the U.S. Treasury.
Yes. All right, questions?
When you make those investments, are they locked in for a year or a certain amount of time?
Well, it just depends. Usually it's a year.
They ladder them.
If Baker Tilly doesn't
Okay.
think that things are going to be, sometimes it's better to invest in the long run because of the lack of any kind of rates going up and get the best rate then. Or if they think they're going to be going up, then we do a shorter term and then wait till that's.
We let them make that decision.
Yeah, leave it to the
They
professionals.
give us
Yeah.
the best options,
Yeah.
Yep.
or show us all the options and we go that
Good.
way.
I'd make a motion to approve the resolution 2022-0701.
Thanks,
Second.
Mike. Second, Jerry. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Any other matters come before the council?
Just kind of piggybacking off of what Diane said, and I'm not sure what all emergency responders were down for First Friday. We had fire trucks in front of our place, and oh my gosh, the kids just had a ball going through those fire trucks. It was really, really nice, so really appreciate them coming down.
Thanks, Cindy.
Mr. Mayor, I was at the commissioners' meeting this morning where they passed our request to redraw the lines for the precincts. And so our redistricting will be moving forward.
Be coming back here.
And they passed it as we presented.
What they did was they rearranged They didn't do anything with our redistricting plans. What they did was they rearranged and added precincts that would fit within our districts so that we do not cross any lines.
Yeah,
That was the goal.
nice.
And Torpy brought it before him this morning, and there was very little discussion. They were all in favor of it, so.
Thank you.
I've mentioned Ann's help before in this, a once in 10-year endeavor like that. We want to be careful. And I think council had a group, Jack's helped out. Of course, our city attorney has guided us well through this, and I think what'll come back from the county, it'll just be pretty much what we had looked favorably upon during our work sessions, so.
Yeah, I would like to thank Ann Torpy for her work. She was very professional, and her due diligence to make sure that things were done properly was great, as was our city attorney. So it all worked out really well.
All right. Questions, comments from our now lone visitor?
Yeah, what about the flag that you presented? Any update on the flag?
We're still knocking that around. So, thanks for the question.
Waving it around.
I'm waving it around.
Mr. Mayor, you might want to tell them that demolition began today
Demolition.
On.
at the Arnold Building.
Oh, good.
So that
I haven't been up there, I didn't know. Great. I knew it was getting ready to start, but
started today.
great.
I
That's
went
gonna
by,
be, that's gonna be exciting.
there's
up there.
rubble.
It's gonna be exciting.
Good.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Thank you.